Today I'll be showing you why HMS Nelson is clearly superior to HMS Collingwood, and I've got sort of two games for you. First, we're going to look at two clips from one game, and then after that, we're going to look at an entire game featuring me versus a Collingwood in as close to a 1v1 scenario as you can possibly get. So we'll see which of the ships come out on top. Spoiler alert, it's the Nelson. But the reason I wanted to show you parts of this game that you see playing out before you is because it demonstrates the efficacy of Nelson's super heal, something Collingwood simply doesn't have. Collingwood, of course, has an improved heal, but it's not enough to reprint more than half of your ship like Nelson's. So what are we doing now? Well, we're inside of a cap, and we're trying to get behind this island because we're being spammed by a Helena. We're on fire 3 times. There's also a Zara out there, and we're going to hit the DCP. But note the Xarkun in the cap. He's launched torpedoes at us, and we're suspecting his torpedoes are going to come around the right side of that island, so we're trying to slow down and turn out of the way. We've just DCP'd the triple fire, which in retrospect may have been a mistake, but take a look at our heal there. We can reprint most of our HP that we lost since it was all fire damage, which is all totally healable, but there are the torpedoes from the Ostergotland while our damage control is on cooldown with over a minute left to go. One torpedo catches us right on the bow and starts a flood that is going to go for the full duration. A flood that goes for a full duration is usually going to be lethal to pretty much any battleship, but not the Nelson. There's a very rare medal in this game that I only had one of. It's called the Unsinkable medal. I got that medal in a ranked game on purpose. I was playing the Nelson, I allowed myself to get hit with a torpedo, and I allowed that flood to go for the full duration before I used the repair party, and that gave me the Unsinkable medal, which you get when you lose a crap ton of your HP to a flood. This game is the second time I've ever gotten an Unsinkable medal, and this time it was clearly by accident. So you can see the flood is about 30-some seconds away from being over. Our DCP is going to be off cooldown in about 10 seconds. We're not even going to bother to use it because we've only got these cruisers that can really shoot at us, and they don't have the punching power to take us down in one hit. So we're going to let the flood play out before we start discharging the repair party, which we will do when it comes off cooldown. And you can see that's going to heal us up to about 2/3 health. Any other battleship in this situation, including Collingwood, would not be able to do this. The Nelson is incredibly tanky in that respect because of its super heal. And then by the end of the game, we're at just about 2/3 health. We've only got a Chumphon and a Massachusetts out there, and you saw the Massachusetts shoot at us. Well, one of his shells ricocheted off of our side armor because it is 32 millimeters, which can be angled against 406 millimeter guns, unlike the Collingwood. So the Nelson can actually defend itself from battleships, even Tier 7 battleships. Collingwood absolutely cannot. Plus, of course, the Nelson has 9 guns. They're 406 millimeter guns, which is effectively the same thing as Collingwood's, and because there are more of them, and also because they enjoy pretty fantastic accuracy, well, they allow us to dev strike a Chumphon right through the bow. So there's a dev strike to sort of end off the game. Take a look at these Massachusetts shells. I think they might have missed us there, actually, but he's going to shoot us at least once more before this battle ends. There's our friend Tactic Angel, by the way, helping us carry this game by, playing the objectives in his destroyer and remaining alive the entire time. There, by the way, right there, you saw all those shells bounce or ricochet? That's because they hit Nelson's angled 32 millimeter armor plate. If this is the Collingwood, they would have just penetrated and done AP penetration damage, but this is the Nelson, the far superior vessel that just happens to be on sale right now for 8,750 doubloons compared to Collingwood's 12.5k. I think you can decide which is the better deal. In any case, this game was only the second time in my history that I got the Unsinkable medal. Not a huge, spectacular amount of damage, but good XP, as you can see there, top of the leaderboard, and yeah. So now, we go on to our feature presentation, an Epicenter game. And of course, we are top tier in this game, so that does come into play a little bit. Last game was a tier 7 game, so we were bottom tier. But now we're on top of our game. When Nelson is top tier, it is absolutely the best battleship at tier 6, bar none. Tier 5 battleships just cannot hold a candle to this thing. It bullies them. It is extremely powerful, and you're going to see that in this game. Now, we have 11.9 km concealment, which is excellent for a battleship. So we're going to use that concealment to try to get into the epicenter a little bit here. You see we're pulling off to the side ever so slightly, but our intention is actually to play the middle of this map, since we are top tier, and since we can exert so much power to either flank of the map with our guns if we play from the center. We've got destroyers pushing in, and there is the Collingwood. Brand new boat. Let's see how that boat fares versus the Nelson. We're going to begin by shooting some HE at him. He's going forward a little bit. We're switching to the AP. Oh, I guess not. We're going to stay with the HE. But shells are traveling over there, and they hit the Collingwood, immediately start a fire, 7,000 damage. That's, I suppose, nothing the Collingwood couldn't also do, but I don't think you'd really get 3 shells to hit with that thing, not consistently, so we're going to say that the Nelson is better in that respect, too. Hatsuharu in front of us, we want to be mindful of him, just in case he's launching torpedoes through this gap. We're going to make a turn here to port, and we're going to try to go back toward the center, now that all the enemy ships are sort of spotted, and we have an idea of where everybody is. We want to avoid taking any torps from that Hatsuharu, and of course we've already steered ourselves far out of the way. Still continuing to shoot HE at the Collingwood. This time we don't get a very good salvo, but our initial fire is still burning on him. Somebody else takes a shot at us from out there with HE, but we don't care because we are the Nelson with a super heal. Light me on fire 2 times, and it doesn't matter. I'll let them both burn for the full duration and heal pretty much the full HP back because this heal is crazy. Now anyway, we're going toward the island here in the center of the epicenter. One last shot on the Collingwood with HE, and now we're switching to AP because we've got 2 cruisers that are threatening to come around the port side of that island. We do want to be mindful of the battleship over there, though, 13 point whatever kilometers away. And there's the Hatsuharu coming out from behind the island over there, getting spotted by our CV. Maybe we would like the HE chambered right now, but the CV is going after the Hatsuharu. I don't think that battleship out there, I think it's a Prinz Heinrich or something. I don't think he's going to be shooting at me. And while the CV is messing with the DD, we're actually going to take a shot at the Budiani out there, who is flat broadside. Nelson is exceptionally good at punishing cruisers because it has the short-fused British armor piercing. Tends to not get overpens, but sure does tend to get a lot of citadels. The Collingwood, on the other hand, has 419mm guns, and as such, it probably has a higher threshold for its shells to arm, meaning the shells actually have to hit a thicker surface of armor before they even arm and detonate within inside the ship. Nelson probably doesn't have that same problem, and the short-fused British armor piercing allows it to be monstrously effective against cruisers in a way that Collingwood simply doesn't feel like it is. Although it might have not the short-fused British armor piercing, I honestly don't know. I citadeled a couple of battleships with the Collingwood the other day, and that tends to not really happen too much in the Nelson because of the short-fused British armor piercing. Anyway, meanwhile, we've got a paid actor in the form of a New Mexico out there just giving us flat broadside. We're going to try to punish that, but I think the Collingwood actually managed to take out 2 of our turrets, so we don't get a very good shot on him. And he's driving into another paid actor on our team who's giving him flat broadside. Although, to be fair, I guess that paid actor was unsatisfied with his compensation. He's now kiting away from the New Mexico and actually angling, so who knows? In any case, we're still in the center, so we're going to get turned around here and we're going to push back into the Collingwood. We're playing in the center of this map, in the epicenter, trying to secure the objective, and that is going to come back and be quite helpful to us in the future. I guess we're going to take some shots at the New Mexico, though, because he's still flat broadside to our position, pushing right into our battleship, looking like he's having some success, and unfortunately, the accuracy, well, actually, that was pretty good. That was like 12k off of him, so he should be going down pretty shortly, and we should be able to turn back in. I think the cap is still occupied by a destroyer, so we do want to be mindful of that. One bad thing about the Nelson, though, is, of course, since there is a CV in this game, Nelson has more or less no AA defense. It's completely incapable of protecting itself from planes to a degree. Well, every battleship is completely incapable of protecting itself from planes. Let's be real, AA is not a valid counter to CVs. At best, it is a soft counter, and it really doesn't matter if you are in pretty much any battleship. A CV is still going to be able to drop you at least once. Just with the Nelson, they'll be able to drop you probably more than once, maybe 2 or 3 times, actually, because that's how bad the AA is. Nevertheless, it's only a Tier 5 CV, so we don't really have to worry too much about it. We're dark now, the CV's coming at us, we're going to get into the smoke screen, hopefully it'll prevent him from spotting us for a brief moment, and maybe he'll decide to go drop his torpedoes on somebody else. Pushing back in toward the Collingwood, mindful of the Heinrich, who is now, or rather the Friedrich, who is now flat broadside to us. Unfortunately, we have the HE chambered, but we're going to switch to the AP. New Mexico is almost back to port. We do get a double fire on the Heinrich, which I think he's going to instantly DCP, and it would be nice to follow that up with another fire, but it's not going to be strictly necessary. We'll be able to shoot the AP at him and hopefully take him out in a single hit after he takes a massive walloping from one of our teammates there. Guns are almost reloaded. Still flat broadside, no angling whatsoever, and we only need really 2 of the guns. 6 shells, by the way, same as Collingwood's. 3 guns, and that gives us the high caliber medal. And the guy has no HP left, so we should be able to take him out with the last salvo from the 3rd turret. And no, not quite. We leave him with just enough health for somebody else to secure the kill, which is perfectly fine as long as he goes down. Now it's just the Collingwood, though, and I guess this isn't really a 1v1 scenario. The Collingwood is really the only ship left alive for any of my teammates to shoot at, but we're going to see just how ineffective the Collingwood is versus the Nelson, because he is going to shoot at me. You can see he's sort of trying to angle, too. Maybe he's under the impression that the Collingwood also shares the same armor scheme as Nelson, but it doesn't. Now, it does have belt armor protecting the Citadel, and at the angle the Collingwood is showing us, well, we probably aren't going to be able to hit his Citadel, even in a battleship that doesn't have short-fused AP, because the shells will ricochet off the Citadel belt armor. But if they hit anywhere above that belt armor at all, they will just penetrate. They'll just overmatch the armor and go right through and do massive chunks of AP damage. Now, that does involve getting the shells on target, and for whatever reason, the Nelson doesn't want to be super accurate in this situation. But you saw that salvo there that the Collingwood sent back at us. It got 2 overpens up near our deck or superstructure, and didn't actually penetrate our side armor, because again, we have 32 millimeters. So the Collingwood is almost down. He's being farmed by, I think, some of our cruisers here, and this last salvo is going to show you what I mean. You see, we take aim right at the center of his ship, and all of our shells penetrate, except for one which shatters, probably on his Citadel armor. And we do a lot of chunky damage to him. That's what happens with the Collingwood. It cannot protect itself against 15 or 16-inch guns, and we've seen earlier in this video and moments ago that the Nelson absolutely can. That 32 millimeters of armor is so significant because it can bounce 15 and 16-inch shells when properly angled. Nelson is, by the way, the poster child, in my mind, of bow tanking is not the strategy you want. This is, I think, a ship that requires a little bit of higher skill to play well, because you cannot simply point your bow at the enemy and be okay. You actually have to rely on good positioning and good angling in order to achieve success in the Nelson. The same is true of Collingwood. The only problem is you can practice good positioning in the Collingwood, but you absolutely cannot angle. And because the Collingwood does not have a super heal like Nelson, you cannot tank damage in the same way. When I say Nelson is a tank, I don't mean it's well armored, because it really isn't. But the armor is enough to mitigate a lot of damage, and then the super heal makes up for the rest of it. So in that way, Nelson is extremely tanky. I have a very high average attracted damage on Nelson, and pretty much every game I play in it where I can achieve some sort of success, I end up getting the Dreadnought medal, because the Nelson is a tank. It just tanks a little bit differently than your typical battleship. It actually has to absorb a lot of damage, and then it heals that damage back up. In that way, it is very tanky. The Collingwood is not. But we're at the end of this battle. We've done about 131,000 damage, nothing too spectacular. I think we are going to get the sinking blow here on the Ranger, and that's going to do it for this video. This is just to give you an idea of how much better Nelson is than Collingwood. It is a night and day difference, and Nelson, just full disclosure, I am a little biased. It's one of my favorite ships in the game. It's definitely my most played ship, and, well, another good example of why it's so good. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.